Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 33rd episode of Comic DNA, on which we will be discussing Criminal Volume 1 by Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips, and Val Staples, first published by Image Comics in 2006. I am Aaron Walther, and with me today are two very special guests. First, we have returning guest, Mr. Anthony Mathenia. Anthony, thanks for coming back.
Yeah, glad to be here again. It's great.
Yes. And secondly, we have a very, very, very special guest. No disrespect to you, Anthony, but...
Yeah, right. The dogs, ladies and gentlemen. No, just kidding.
Yeah, that's okay. I'll edit those out. But no disrespect to you, Anthony. But we also have a very, very, very special guest, Mr. Seth Ferranti. Seth, thank you very much for being on the show.
What's up? Nice to meet you. I'm sorry about my dog.
It's all right. It's no problem. So, before we start talking about Criminal, I want to take a moment to introduce and get to know Seth. Because, Seth, I am very, very excited to talk to you. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but you are, in fact, a convicted LSD kingpin, and you spent 21 years in a federal prison, is that correct?
Yep, that's correct. I just got out, actually, in February. I went to prison in October 1993, and I got out in February 2014.
Oof. And, while you were in prison, you started writing and publishing books, right?
Yeah, about the end of the 90s, I started writing for some magazines, and then eventually in 2005, I put out my first book.
Oh, okay. So you were doing like what kind of stuff were you writing for magazines?
I started writing a column for Vice. When Vice was just a magazine. They were pretty small when I first started. This was like probably around 99, and I started writing a column for them called I'm Busted. And it was just about different stuff that went on in prison, like the drug trade or, gambling or, dudes getting, punished or checked in the hole, because they wouldn't pay their bills, stuff like that.
Man, that's very interesting. And how many books have you published?
I've published 8 books currently.
And is it all just like true crime fiction or others?
All true crime, nonfiction.
Oh, nonfiction. Okay.
Yeah, I write a lot about prison. Mm-hmm. My first book was actually called Prison Stories, and I've written a lot about prison. I have another book called Guerrilla Convict Writing, which is all about prison and my experiences in prison. But then I have 6 books that I wrote on other people, a lot of the urban gangsters that I was locked up that had become a part of hip-hop's lyrical lore. And I was locked up with these dudes, and I met them, and I proposed, to write the books about them, and I interviewed them.
Wow, yeah. I was going to start talking about Supreme Team. Just tell me a little bit about Supreme Team. Where did that start?
Well, the Supreme Team, I was in SCI Gilmer from 2004 to 2006. And one of the gentlemen that I was there with was Kenneth Supreme McGriff. And at this time, there was when Murder Inc. and Ja Rule and Irv Gotti, they were like pretty big in the hip hop world. Mm-hmm. And everybody on the compound, they kept talking about this dude, Supreme. I never really heard about the Supreme Team, maybe a little, but they never really stuck out to me. And they kept talking about this dude, Supreme, on the compound. They were saying he owned Murder Inc. and he shot 50 Cent and all types of stuff like this. And I had just put my first book out, Prison Stories, at this point, but I was already writing about urban gangsters for magazines like Don Diva and Feds. Mm-hmm. And actually, the people from Don Diva contacted me, and they're like, look, try to get an interview with this guy, because he was getting so much news, especially in New York, like in the New York Daily Post and stuff like that. It was like every rap-related crime they were attributing to him in New York. Oh, okay. So I got introduced to him, and I started meeting him. And I do interviews with a lot of people. I've written about a lot of people. I mean, I've probably interviewed, I don't know if I've interviewed 1,000 people, but I've probably interviewed close to that, maybe more, I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. But it's definitely a lot. And most people, you interview, you do the story, and then you move on to the next story. But this guy, he was just such a charismatic guy and real smart, intelligent guy, and we were having a lot of conversations about business, and I was showing him all my books and all the different stuff I was doing, and he had all these plans and stuff, because he was supposed to get out that summer of 2005, but he ended up the feds, right before he was going to get out, they indicted him on that Murder Inc. case, along with Irv Gotti. And they said, he eventually got convicted for a murder for hire. So, once they took him back from court, I never saw him again, but I kept in touch with him. And we were working on like the Don Diva article, which was the first time he actually spoke in a media publication.
Oh, wow.
And then once we did that, because he was trying to tell his side of the story, we did another article for Don Diva about that Murder Inc. case. And then I was writing him back and forth through my wife. And then eventually I proposed the book. I said, you know what? Let me tell a story. Let me tell your whole story in a book, The Supreme Team.
That's really cool. And so when did that book come out?
That book came out in 2010.
Okay. And that's the book that you are currently adapting into a comic book?
Yeah, that's a book that we're adapting into a comic book.
Mm-hmm. And you, Anthony, you're working on that with him?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of... One of the things that I'm like really into as far as comics goes is bringing in like outside voices.
Yeah.
And having them tell their stories because they're already great storytellers. But like, just like I came to comics as a novelist and fell in love with the way to tell a different kind of story, that's what fires me up. So when I first heard about Seth and his story, and when I read The Supreme Team, I'm like, man, this would be a cool comic. And I was like, hey, Seth, you ever thought about doing a comic? He's like, yeah, I've been thinking about it. I just couldn't do it. The logistics couldn't happen while he was in prison. But yeah, we started working on it, and he's a great storyteller, even though he's been mostly like the nonfiction thing. But man, it was seamless. Him like telling the Supreme Team in a different way. And my role in it was just largely technical. It was just like, hey, we can only have this many panels per page and that sort of thing. Just kind of like, teaching somebody how to tell a story, with the technicalities of comics. But man, I'm mostly backseat to like Seth and the illustrator Joe Wills. I'm just like trying to keep it all going and stuff. But those guys are really the highlight of this.
Yeah, I saw the Kickstarter that you guys have up, and that's is that just to cover the first issue?
Yeah, we're trying to raise $5,000 right now, which we're almost at $3,000 right now with about 2 weeks left. Mm-hmm. But we're trying to raise that for the first preview issue. To have the preview issue out, but we got plans. We want to do a whole graphic novel.
Right.
And actually, when it goes over well, I got plans mapped out already for from the book. I can do about 15 issues or 3 graphic novels.
Oh, cool.
But we got to do one step at a time. We're trying to get this preview issue out.
Yeah.
So we can go to the Comic Cons starting in 2016 and hand them out and see what type of buzz we can create.
Yeah, it's a really good looking book.
Yeah, one of the things about this is like what we're trying to do is like bring what's called like street lit or urban fiction into a comic book form, and it hasn't really been done. So what we wanted to do is have this like initial, a floppy comic book that we can show people, to introduce what we're trying to do. And like Seth said, we've got plans for 3 graphic novels to tell the whole story of the Supreme Team, of which this is just one chapter. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, another part of this Kickstarter that we haven't really gone into is the fact that this will be the seed to do a whole line of street fiction or street lit urban fiction graphic novels by some huge names that are like already established storytellers in the fiction market. Mm-hmm. And just like we've with Seth, I'm coming from like a nonfiction true crime and showing him how to write a comic book and go through that. We're currently working with like some really special names in street lit fiction and doing the same process. And like to back Supreme Team, you're going to get a great comic book. Mm-hmm. I love it, but it's also going to be like a little a seed to where what we're trying to do is to like just max out comic diversity and just bring in like outside voices and just push comics to the limit, because that's what I'm all about.
I gotta be honest, Seth, I could just spend this whole episode just talking and interviewing with you just about everything that you've done and just your time in prison. But honestly, like really, we're here to talk about the Brubaker and Phillips book, Criminal.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah, I'm cool.
Yeah,
I'm cool with that.
good. So, in previous episodes of Comic DNA, we've gotten, well, even Anthony even just said like how he came to comics like later in life, like from novels. Seth, like when did you first start reading comics? Have you always been into comics, or is it just something you were just kind of aware of?
I was reading comics since the first Secret Wars started coming out. So
nice.
would say when was that? Like mid '80s?
Yeah, that would have been
early '80s.
Yeah, like 85,
I guess. That's when I started. I started reading comics. I've always been a Marvel guy. My whole life. I love Marvel. I love the characters. I love Thor, the Incredible Hulk, Wolverine.
Mm-hmm.
I was a dude that used to read all the X-Men books, all the spin-offs. I had X-Men, X Factor, Bishop, Gambit.
Oh yeah.
I used to subscribe to all those, and even into my 20s, even after I got locked up. I would say almost to my early 30s, I used to subscribe, but I was also into all the independents, like in the 90s when the independents started coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Like I love comics like Divine Right, The Max,
Oh yeah,
Brew the Wanderer,
Mm.
Battle Chasers, loved all that stuff. I'm a big fantasy guy too. I love reading fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
So even like when they started putting out like the R.A. Salvatore, when he started putting out his line, he has like the books from the Forgotten Realms, and they started doing the Forgotten Realms comics.
Mm-hmm.
I loved all those, but not to say, I like Batman and the Joker. I'm a big Frank Miller fan. Love Frank Miller stuff,
Sure.
Batman stuff. But basically, I'd say I'm a Marvel dude, and being specific, I'm an X-Men dude. So.
Oh man, I'll have to have you back on. We'll talk about some X-Men comics because I've done, I think, maybe 3 or 4 episodes on X-Men. I'm a pretty big X-Men fan myself.
Yeah, I love the X-Men.
Yeah.
Even back then, like in the 80s, the late 80s, and the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
I was always thinking, right? You got to think this was like 20-something years ago.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, or even longer now, almost 30 years ago. But I was like, why don't they make movies on this stuff? Why don't they make movies? And now, but back then it was like, it was like geeks read comics, or not necessarily geeks or the outcast, but I wasn't saying like I was geek or outcast, but I was kind of like in the stoner crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And even in the stoner crowd, not everybody read comics, but some did. But it was still like a little enclave like in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And the other people that did it, and we used to like sit around. We'd sit around and smoke weed or trip on LSD. And we'd look at the comics and we'd be like, man, this would be the baddest movie. And lo and behold, 20-something years later, I guess Hollywood finally got the clue. And now look at it. It's like this major, multi-billion-dollar franchise.
It's like all the dominant films are all superhero stuff.
All superhero.
Yeah.
And I was saying back like in 1990, I was like, the X-Men, man, this stuff would make awesome movies.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, probably back then, they didn't have the technology to make it as good as they could have.
Yeah.
Because even like if you think of the superhero movies back then, some were kind of lame, but now it's like the technology and all the computer graphics and stuff, and they can make it, even though they don't follow the storylines from the comic books, which I understand that because a movie has to have a certain highs and lows,
right.
To make it work. They got a certain formula, so they got to fit the story into the movie formula. But still, with the computer graphics and everything, I think it's amazingly close to the imagery that was originally drawn in the X-Men comics.
Oh, for sure. But anyway, so that's great to hear, Seth. I'm glad to have somebody on the show who's just a big fan of comics, because that's what we're here for. So, because we love comics. Have you ever read anything by Ed Brubaker?
I heard of Ed Brubaker. And I've seen the comic around, but actually I just read it today. Mm-hmm. I read the whole graphic novel, Criminal, mm-hmm. Coward, and I didn't really know what to expect. I know that for crime comics, he's like the guy in crime comics.
Yes.
And so I didn't really know what to expect writing it. I didn't know if it was like real graphic or it was going to be more like a story. Mm-hmm. But after reading it, I can actually see why he is the guy in crime comics. When I was reading it and just the story and the way he had like the main character Leo, he's like the bad guy, but the good guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the anti-hero, or however you want to say it. It really reminded me of Quentin Tarantino. That's the first thing that came to mind, except not as graphic.
Yeah, it doesn't have that. Yeah, he doesn't quite have like that sort of style, like necessarily the exact same style as Tarantino, like with the violence and whatnot. But I get what you're saying about like the character. The
twist, you know, because it had the twist, the Tarantino twist, because you really don't know what direction it is going to go, and it almost took about 60 pages until I even, you know, started to figure that character out.
Mm-hmm.
Leo, you know, like, you know, because they have the thing, okay, coward, so you're like, what does this do to coward? And especially coming from like a prison or a criminal perspective, where to be a coward or a punk is like the lowest thing.
Right.
And I'm reading it and I'm like, what? This dude a coward? I'm like, what is this? And then, you know, he does kind of act like certain situations at first, you know, kind of leads credence, you know, to the title. And I'm like, what is this dude? He's like always running away from trouble. But then like you get to the end and it all comes out, you know, and really he's scared of himself, or he's scared what he's going to do. And actually, I've been in prison with people that say that, or, you know, that are like that. Because, you know, there's some dudes, maybe 20, 30 years ago, they might have committed a murder. And now they got a life sentence in prison. And maybe now they're a changed person. They might be into religion, or they just might be not trying to get in all to the nonsense that young kids get into. And I've been around dudes, and, you know, somebody will do something and they'll be like, man, they don't even want that side of me to come out.
Right.
So I perfectly understand that. You know, because in prison you can be with someone and something, they just flip a switch. You know, it can be someone, they can be calm and serene, and then somebody just does something and then a flip just switches. It could be someone you thought was your real good friend and you can't even calm them down, and eventually you have to step out of the way because they're going to be like, look, if you don't let me do what I'm going to do, then I'm going to do it to you.
Yeah, wow.
So just that whole perspective that Brubaker brings in that character, Leo, I can understand that real intimately. And, you know, like I said, going into it, I was kind of questioning, like, you know, what is up? Where is this book going? What is he writing about? But then at the end, I really, really got it.
That's cool. I'm glad. I was hoping that you would have that kind of perspective on this book, because, like, the way Brubaker writes, he's really, like you said, he's really known for being like the top, not just crime writer, but really like pulp writer. Like his roots in writing, where he's coming from, he's like a big fan of just old pulp crime novels. And I was just go ahead, Anthony. Yeah.
No, and it shows. It's like our whole thing, like when me and Seth were talking about doing the Supreme Team, is like crime comics have been on hold since the comic book code came in the 1950s, right?
Yeah.
It killed the genre. So you have like Brubaker like bringing it back, right?
Yeah, that's really what it is.
And it really pays homage, even though it's like set in contemporary times. It pays homage to the crime comics of the past and that noir style. And one of the things that I really like about him, like what Seth was talking about, is like the twist, right? He doesn't throw everything out in like page 1 or chapter 1.
Yeah.
It evolves over time.
He doesn't give away anything.
Right.
Which is risky with comics, right? Because you got to hook people with issue 1, and that's something as a writer or as an editor I struggle with.
Oh, definitely.
It was like, man, do we have to like spell it all out in like issue 1 like it's a Hollywood trailer, right? We got to tell the story to hook people. You know, or do you have the time to do that slow boil, which Brubaker does so well. When I came into comics, like one of the books that I picked up first was Fatale.
Oh yeah.
And you know, his style, I haven't like read as much. Pretty consistent in that, like, you know, he trickles out the little clues and the directions the way the story's going.
Yeah. Like
over like many issues, and you've got to like really be on it and pay attention.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a big fan of Brubaker, and I love the way, like, just talking about Criminal especially. Criminal has been one of my favorite books ever since he started putting it out. And I love, like what you were saying, Anthony, is how the book is written, really, like, the pacing of it, the whole thing is paced as a graphic novel. The pacing of it is for the 140-page book, not the 20-some-odd page installments, you know?
Right.
And that pays off really well. I think it pays off really well when you read it in one sitting. I have to admit, I got to a point, I was buying this book as it was coming out in issues, and I really like the issues because they have a lot of just like supplemental stuff with the issues, like articles just about like classic crime fiction or film noir, just Ed or other guest writers just kind of writing about what they like, kind of like what we're doing now with Criminal itself. But it's frustrating to read like that, like month to month, and just kind of like, here's 20 pages, here's 20 pages, here's 20 pages, because it's paced like it's all meant to be read all together.
Right.
So I got to a point where I wasn't reading it. I was buying it as it was coming out monthly, but I would wait until the whole like story arc was finished, and then I would just read all the issues in one sitting. But it works. Yeah.
That's how I felt about like Fatale, because I came into that buying like the single issues and that, and I think it really suffered my actual reading of it because it was meant to be like a full-on work.
Yeah.
I've got the really slick hardcover of it, the first one, here now, and that's my preferred way to read it.
Yeah.
I had all the single issues of that, which like this hoarder came to like my yard sale when I was moving, and got a really good deal in Fatale, and like Saga, man, he's got the whole run now. But I just prefer to read these things as like especially those books like that are constructed like that, as like a full on piece. I mean, that's just seems like the better way to read it.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, as three guys who have all been making our own comics, or at least in the process of doing it in some fashion, sometimes like the economics of just making a 150-page graphic novel is just too much. And that's why we have the monthly system that we have, But it can be frustrating.
Well, exactly. It's a huge undertaking to make a comic book.
Yeah.
And like with Supreme Team, just coming from like our perspective of things, again, it's like we're doing like the preview issue, the chapter one of the story is like, how much of the story do you give away?
Right, exactly.
Which like when you read like Brubaker, you realize the finesse that he does this whole thing, and you can really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. I think.
Yeah. Go
ahead. Go ahead, Seth. Yeah.
When I was reading that, like, in the first chapter, it's all about the heist. They're setting the heist.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, like, you see so many movies where they go and they find the guy and then they set up the heist, and that's like everything.
That's the climax.
So I'm like reading it, and then it's like the heist is done, and then it's like a whole nother story, and I was kind of like, like I thought I was thinking like the heist. I was thinking something like Italian Job, or something like that. Coming in, never having read Brubaker before, and just like with a fresh perspective, I'm thinking like a Hollywood Italian Job kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then it just like, so I'm thinking it's going to be the build up, and it was over, and I was kind of like, and then it had that twist, and I was like, then it kind of turned into a different movie.
Yeah.
Almost each issue in that whole story arc for the whole Coward graphic novel was kind of like, you could almost say like it had a different theme, in a way that would be a full movie thing. Because then it was like, they were on the run. Mm-hmm. And then it was like reminding me of other movies. So I like the way he kind of crafted it, and he kind of did different parts. But then that's why I said it really reminded me of Quentin Tarantino, because the way Quentin Tarantino like mashes different storylines together.
Yeah.
And I think Brubaker kind of does that. It's like a start-stop, but at the same time, it all runs together.
Yeah, it's definitely, like, I think one of the best, like, I've talked about this before on the other podcast where we talk about Brubaker, but he has just got such a master craft over all of the, like, crime tropes and just, like, the pulp, like, characters, and he seamlessly edits it all together into a very fresh story. Like, these are all things that, like, we've seen before in fiction. Characters getting betrayed, all of the characters, it's all stuff that's like been around, but he's able to just perfectly put it all together into something that feels new and still surprises you. Like I still like we keep talking about like the twists in the book. Like I really didn't. Like, I guess it's just because part of it is, like, when you're reading it, I'm just caught up in reading it, and I'm not really thinking about, like, exactly where these characters are going or what's going to happen to them. But it's, like, it's so engaging. You just can't put it down.
Yeah, the way I read it, I mean, I read stuff for entertainment. I did in prison for a lot of years, but, the longer I've been writing, which I've been writing going on 16 years now, because I've been writing since 99.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty steadily and doing books since 2005, and now I'm just embarking on this journey to write comics, and I hope this will be another viable career for me. But I try to read everything now with a critical eye, almost like I'm dissecting it, like I'm studying it, because really I was reading it and I was being entertained, but at the same time as a writer, this guy's won all these awards and he's had all this success, so I was reading it with a critical eye. See, what is he doing that's making him so successful, to see if I can emulate it in my own way.
Oh, absolutely. I always say when people talk about like wanting to like learn how to write anything, I always say just read. Just if you want to be a good writer, just read a lot, and you just got to study the people that you like and the people that are really good, and just read. Like a professor is only going to be able to tell you so much. You need to just see what people are doing.
Yeah, I tell people the same way. You would be amazed at, once I started getting books out and I was in prison, just all the different compounds, that I would transfer to, and the people, I would just have like, literally hundreds and hundreds of people that they had ideas for novels, and they'd want to come up and talk to me and just, tell me their idea or ask me for advice.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I always told them. I told them almost the same thing that you just said. I said, look, find a book that you like, that you read and you really enjoy. And I'm not telling you, to copy it.
Right.
Or copy the story, but insert your own story, but emulate the style, emulate the format, emulate that the words are put together, emulate the way that the paragraphs are put together. And I also would tell them, I would say, look, you got a copy of that book? I say, go back and read that book.
Mm-hmm.
And now don't read it just for entertainment. Read it, study it, like an artifact, and really go into deep to it and dissect it and figure out, what did this writer do that made me like this book? And then, use that. It's almost like a self-study kind of thing, but it's almost just like you said, and I felt like I really did that over a lot of years. I read the different stuff. Like even my first book, Prison Stories, I read in the Belly of the Beast, Inside the Belly of the Beast by Jack Henry Abbott.
Mm-hmm.
So really, I was trying to write that book.
Yeah.
It just came out Prison Stories because I was writing my story from prison in the 90s.
It's like when I first wanted to go from like novels to like write comics, I went to the comic book store and I was like, okay, who are the greats? So they gave me like Alan Moore and Grant Morrison, and that's when I also got into like Fatale by Brubaker, because that had just like the first issue came out. Saga by Brian K. Vaughan, I got the first issue of that. It's now tattered because I like loaned it out to everybody. It was like, read this.
Yeah.
And so when I go to Comic Cons and they have like a huge price tag on, I'm like, damn it, no, I'm not, because I'm like, for the artist in me is like, man, comics are meant to be. But yeah, it was like, that's how I learned comics, is by looking at these guys and like figuring out what they did, not to like ape it or like, try to be like, write like Alan Moore or write like Grant Morrison. Who can?
Right.
Who can write like Brubaker? But no, just to see, the finesse and the skill and the talent that these guys, how they do it, so you could like tell your own story, your own version, and like build on what they've already like started. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah, that is one of the reasons I like reading Brubaker, because I think Brubaker is the master of decompressed storytelling, which, just as a brief explanation for anybody that's listening, and for you, Seth and Anthony, I don't know if you guys how familiar are with that terminology, but basically with comics they come out monthly, and the way they used to do it, like Seth, the comics you would have read in the 80s, was each issue was a story. And then now they're at a point where each issue is just a part of a story. So each issue is like part one of this. Like I mean, this is what Criminal was. Like, issue 1 is part 1 of the story, issue 2 is part 2, and part 3, and it's meant to then be read as like one complete story over 5 issues. And that became a writing style known as decompressed writing, where the story felt like it was stretched out. Like, it was a whole story that could have been told in 22 pages, but it was stretched out to fill, 80 or 100 pages, so then you'd have a nice trade paperback that you could sell instead of a single issue. And, I think a lot of people, a lot of people feel different ways about it. As many things, I don't think you can say that, like, decompressed writing killed comics, or I should say, I don't think you can say that decompressed writing is a bad way to write comics. It's just that people who do it poorly. But people who do it really well, like Ed Brubaker, does it really well, and it shows in books like these.
I think it's also, I never heard that term decompressed writing before, but I mean, I recognize it because even like in the late 90s and the early 2000s, like all the TV shows, like when HBO and Showtime started doing all the shows,
yes.
like The Sopranos, The Wire, Breaking Bad, all those, it's the same kind of storytelling.
Same thing.
Instead of making a movie, which they could have made a movie out of all those shows, and they probably would have been awesome movies, but they stretched it out and they really developed all the characters and all the different storylines, and you had like 3, 4, 5 different storylines going on. Really, that's the same thing I try to do with the Supreme Team, because there's so many characters,
right?
So many colorful characters, and different guys. I got it all planned in my head. I've only got a couple issues actually on paper, but I wrote the nonfiction book, so I just got storylines and storylines. I mean, I got the main storyline, but then I got all the little underlying storylines. And just like Brubaker does, I mean, I don't know how long he's been doing it or if he got it, but I kind of got it from watching those shows when I was in prison, like The Wire, The Sopranos, and Breaking Bad.
Yeah, Brubaker is one of the earliest. Well, like, he's sort of that part of that first wave of decompressed writing. He was doing comics work, I think. It would have been in the late 90s, like crossing over into 2000, when he was doing his book Sleeper at I forgot the company now. We talked about Sleeper on this podcast before, but like anyway, that's not really important. But yeah, he's kind of been doing that. But it was, like you're saying, Seth, that was kind of at that same time when TV was like getting ready to kind of go in that direction too. And like like I said, it's a style, and I think it like in a book like this, it just works really well. I think one of the things that makes it really work with Criminal specifically is that I'm such a huge fan of Sean Phillips' art, and he is able to capture just like the mood of these characters, and his characters always have like such an expressive facial expression, even though it's not like a realistic art style. Like, he's not drawing like true life. It's kind of stylized with like the way he uses shapes and stuff, but it always is really like evocative of, like, you can just tell exactly what's going on the page and like what you're supposed to be feeling.
Yeah, the art reminded me of Dave Crossland, who drew the Scarface.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it kind of had it, because like you said, it's not like a real mainstream. It's not like a Marvel or DC style,
right?
But it's definitely a style unto itself, and that's what I really like. Dave Crossland, I love his art because it kind of almost reminds me of like Frank Miller or Ralph Steadman in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Phillips, he has that kind of, not so much to the extreme, because his is a lot more simpler, the pictures and stuff, but I think it conveys that same type of imagery.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, those two, they've been working together for a long time, and every book that they do together is just pure gold. I mean, they're just both firing on all cylinders whenever they are together. And I really like, it really works.
Like
go ahead.
with
Go ahead, Anthony. Yeah.
with comic writers, like one of the things you like really want is to find the like perfect partner.
Yeah.
Who can like adapt your vision to the printed page. You can't draw yourself, which is like the unicorn.
Yeah.
Ed Pliskin. But no, man, it was cool for me. Like I've read Fatale, which is their newest stuff.
Mm-hmm.
To go back to like Criminal Coward, which is like earlier, and kind of see, the evolution of it, because we all level up, right, as creators.
Right.
But man, Coward was solid with the drawing and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a noir style, but also like really kind of like fresh and contemporary at the same time.
Yeah, it was. Well, I mean, even this book at this point, this would have been like the. I mean, they'd been working together for years. By the time they did this, they had done like 20 some odd issues of their book Sleeper, and they'd gotten together for a Batman comic called Gotham Noir, where it was just a straight up film noir version of Batman, and it's pretty cool. But yeah, so like when they came together for Criminal, like they had pretty much like they knew each other inside out and out. You know what I mean? And it shows on the page.
Right. Yeah, it's that synergy. It's like, man, for like the writer and artist synergy.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I've talked to Ed Pliskin about like Hip Hop Family Tree,
mm-hmm.
and he's like a solid cartoonist type of guy who's like, I really feel like there's like a few cases where like a writer or an artist can like reach that symmetry of like a true like one man show type cartoonist.
Yeah.
But man. Brubaker and Phillips, right? Because we like use them in the same sentence.
Exactly, yeah. One of the things I like about Criminal as a series too, kind of like what you guys are talking about, how you want to do with Supreme Team, like how you got other stories and other characters involved, and how you want to flesh the whole thing out into like their own chapters and whatnot into the book. Criminal, actually, that's very similar to how it functions. It's essentially like an anthology series, where each story arc is about a different character. But they all kind of take place in the same city, and they all kind of like, some of their stories cross over in certain ways, and like in this first book, there's characters that are mentioned. Like they talk about the character of Tracy Lawless. That's like Leo's dad went to prison for the murder of Tracy Lawless. And like in future, like in the next story, actually I think it's the next story arc is called Lawless. And it's about that guy, or his family, essentially. So there's like this really cool, like, just classic film noir style to the whole series. But yeah, so I would definitely recommend you guys to read the rest of the series. If you really liked this book, I know you'll. Honestly, I think it gets better. There are some really, really good. Some of the story arcs, the graphic novels, the later ones, man, they get really good.
I'm surprised they haven't made a movie of it yet.
I kind of am too. Like, I was hesitating whether or not I was gonna bring this up, but like with the super success of the, what's the show? True Detective.
Yeah.
Is that on Showtime?
HBO.
Okay, that is an HBO show. So yeah, with like the success of True Detective, I'm looking at that. I'm looking at True Detective, and I'm like, I don't know if you guys watched the show. I watched the first season.
I watched the first season, loved it. Second season, I'm kind of like, I need to watch it maybe like in one sitting, like a graphic novel type viewing of it. Exactly, because it kind of lost me early.
Yeah. Well, I watched the first season and I was like, this is cool. Like it wasn't my favorite thing, but honestly, I was watching it and it made me think of the book Criminal, and I was like, I wish they could do something with Criminal like they're doing with True Detective. It's just tailor-made for it.
Right. It's that slow reveal over time. You've got the solid characters that like draw you in, even where the story is like lacking.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Where you have no plot, you're like drawn in by the characters, and then like the plot sneaks up on you, like in behind. So yeah, that's like perfect, man.
Yeah. And Elmore,
go ahead.
Elmore Leonard, he's real big. They make a bunch of his stuff movies, and they made that show Justified off Elmore Leonard.
Yeah, they also did the Tarantino film. Jackie Brown was based on his book.
That's right.
Yeah, Pam Grier, holla.
Yeah,
I love her.
I just saw her last weekend in Kansas City Comic.
I know, dude. I'm jealous.
I didn't go get an autograph or anything. I wanted to. I thought about it, but. Yeah.
Have you seen the cover of my book, Deep Penitentiary 6? I gave the artist Pam Grier pictures.
Yeah.
So it really ticked me off. I moved states away right when she comes to that new Kansas City Comic Con.
Yeah, bad timing.
It's I always go to Comic Con and there's never anybody I've ever been excited about until I move, and then it's oh yeah, Pam Grier's going to be there. It's damn it.
That's how they get you. But yeah, I think you were just saying something about the dialogue and the characters and how the characters in Criminal, you just kind of get caught up in just their conversations, And it is one of my favorite things about the book is that not only is it all real, all the characters, all the way they talk, the way they speak to each other, everything feels so very real. But it also talking about the synergy between the artist and the writer, I think it just plays so perfectly on the page. The way Phillips does a lot of these small tight panels of a character's face, and you just kind of get that back and forth conversation. I've seen other artists do that, and it's not a lot of times it's a boring flat layout. It's just a grid, just panel, 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 panel. But Phillips is able to really make a really elegant page out of a bunch of characters just sitting in a booth talking to each other,
Like with the books I write, it's a lot of talking, and seeing something Criminal, how you can make just two people talking interesting.
Yeah.
How you frame the panels and stuff. It's a fucking study.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I love Criminal so much is because I really like to look at it like that. Because I love a good conversation between characters, and that's can be kind of a hard thing to pull off in comics because comics are all about the image.
The big splash page
exactly.
with the two guys punching each other out.
Exactly. It's all about the motion of the page, and there's no motion between two characters standing still and having a conversation, But there is.
You do it with camera angles.
Exactly. You create the motion. It's just all in how the page is set up, and that's one of those things that I think a lot of people when you're reading a book or when you're reading a comic, you don't really think about it. But as somebody who wants to create comics, that's constantly what I'm looking at, and that's constantly what I'm thinking about is how do you set up this page to make it look interesting of just characters stationary, just having a conversation. It's not even an emotional conversation. It's not an emotional conversation where characters are yelling at each other and throwing a chair. It's just it's almost like television or a stage play. It's just about the dialogue and about the characters and the subtlety of the scene. But it plays so well with Sean Phillips' art.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's all that being said, that's why Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips continue to be one of my absolute favorite writer-artist teams, hands down. And Criminal is probably one of my favorite comics that has ever been put out. I definitely recommend, as I said, I think I said this a minute ago, I definitely recommend you guys read the rest of it if you really like this. I don't know, any final thoughts you want to add about the book?
I would say going in, just hearing about Brubaker and Phillips and not really knowing what to expect, I was really impressed, and I can honestly say since I've been out in prison, I read a lot of stuff. I read a lot of books, a lot of comics. Mm-hmm. Since I've been out, I don't think I've read one book, and I've read a couple comic books here or there. So for me to actually sit down, and read the whole graphic novel and it actually keep my attention, that says a lot for the writer and the artist.
Yeah.
So I was really impressed, and I might read some more just to keep, for the entertainment value, but also just keep studying
sure
his style and the stuff he does, because really even more than the entertaining factor, that's what impressed me.
Yeah. Yeah, the pure craft that these guys have. I mean, there's reason. That's the reason. I say this all the time, but like that's why they're like at the tops of the comic book industry.
But yeah, now I'm ready for me and Joe Wills to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think. Yeah, well, that's great, guys. But like I said, I mean, I'm rooting for you. I think it's gonna pay off.
Can I plug the Kickstarter real quick?
Absolutely, yeah. Go right ahead, man.
All right. Well, there's 2 weeks left on the Kickstarter for the Supreme Team comic. You can go right on Kickstarter, just type in Supreme Team, and you're gonna find it. We put a lot of work in. We got different videos. We have the art up there. We even have some of the art moving around in the video, so it's almost like a stop motion animation that you can check out with voiceovers about what it's all about. So like I said, we're trying to raise $5,000. We got almost $3,000 right now with about 50 backers. So if you can go on there, if you're interested in this type of stuff, put $5, $10, $20, $25. If we get another 80 to 100 people, we're good. So go ahead and check it out.
Yeah, I think you guys are definitely going to get it. It looks solid.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. So, I think that's pretty much all we have to say about Criminal, other than just how freaking jealous we are of Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips' greatness. But that's all right. That's pretty much me and any professional creator. But so yeah, thank you everybody for listening. I'm Aaron Walther. You can find me on Facebook, and you can also find me on Twitter at AAWALTHER. That's AA Walther on Twitter. And you can find comics that I have written at AaronWalther.com and NewHavenComics.com. And you can find new episodes of this podcast, Comic DNA, at comicdna.podbean.com. Anthony?
Hey, what's up? Check out stashpublishing.com. That's STACHE, like the hipster mustache. Stashpublishing.com on Twitter. We're at stash_comics.com. And yeah, check out Supreme Team on Kickstarter. Just like type in Supreme Team, and you'll find us.
Excellent. And Seth, do you have a Facebook and a Twitter you want to share?
Yeah, my Facebook. I'm on Facebook at Seth Ferranti, SETHFERRANTI. The same at Twitter at Seth Ferranti. And I also got a website with all my true crime stuff where you can get my true crime books. And it has a multitudes of different articles on prison gangs, street legends, the mafia, and life inside the belly of the beast. That's at GorillaConvict.com, GorillaConvict.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, both of you, for being on the episode. I had a lot of fun talking to you, Seth. I'm really looking forward to Supreme Team. And, I definitely think you guys read some more Criminal. Maybe we'll do another episode on another Brubaker Phillips book. Or, like I said...
that'd be cool.
Yeah, we can do that. Seth, I definitely want to have you back on the show, even if it's just to talk about old X-Men comics or something.
All right,
that'd be cool, too.
Yeah, so excellent. Well, I'll be in touch with you guys. And everybody out there listening, thank you very much. I should say that for the next episode, those of you who have been listening to these podcasts, I keep teasing this episode I'm going to do with my artist friend Chris McJunkin. I keep teasing that we're going to do this episode about Preacher, the Garth Ennis and Steve Dillon book. And it has yet to happen, but it is going to happen. I'm promising you now. Last time I didn't want to make any promises. I'm promising you now. Next episode, Chris McJunkin and I are going to be talking about Preacher by Garth Ennis and Steve Dillon. So come back for that one. That's going to be a really good episode, and we will see you all next time.